Well, let's take a look now at one of our top stories tonight. Former South African Revenue Service Commissioner Tom Moyane will finally get to cross-examine Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry tomorrow. Moyane's legal team has confirmed that he obtained permission after being denied this last year. To speak to us about the significance of this is political analyst Professor Dirk Kotze. Professor Kotze, good evening, and thank you so much for your time. This evidence, of course, doesn't come in a vacuum. It takes place at a time where political tensions are quite high, and the Commission of Inquiry itself is facing incredible challenges, not least of which being questions around whether or not it is an honest broker or a fair broker when it comes to the evidence of different parties.
Yes, that is indeed so. And I think this is why this cross-examination is so important, because this is now there. Tomorrow it will be in the hands of Mr. Moyane and his legal representatives to confront Minister Pravin Gordhan. Mm-hmm. So it's not being led by the legal team of the Commission, but it is rather led by Mr. Moyane himself and his team. And that gives them the opportunity to set aside the images, perceptions or the ideas that might exist or that they contend that exist, which have been created in a negative way about Mr. Moyane. So this is the opportunity for the other side to respond or to clear their name. And it hasn't happened much with the Commission so far. So this is indeed a very important opportunity for both, for Mr. Moyane as well as Minister Pravin Gordhan, to protect their reputation.
If we look at part of the evidence and the reports that have been conducted, in particular at SARS, Mr. Moyane has come out largely discredited by some of the findings of those reports. What is he going to need to do tomorrow in order to convince the South African public and even perhaps Judge Zondo himself that in fact what is being worked on, that is already on the record, simply cannot be trusted?
Well, I think first of all, he will try to undermine the credibility of Mr. Pravin Gordhan. So he would possibly try to introduce new evidence in order to discredit Minister Pravin Gordhan. He will concentrate, I think, quite a lot on the early retirement that the deputy director of SARS, Mr. Ivan, during the time of Minister Pravin Gordhan was Minister, as well as the drug unit, I think, will also return as a focus point of this, because Mr. Moyane will argue that it was approved ultimately by Pravin Gordhan when he was still the chief executive of SARS. At the same time, I think he will try to present or to undermine the credibility in general of the evidence of Mr. Pravin Gordhan, and try to say, well, this is a political campaign against me. I'm associated with President Zuma, and because of the state capture rhetoric that exists, they try to implicate me in that respect. So his main challenge tomorrow is to try to undermine the evidence that have been presented by Minister Pravin Gordhan about 2 years ago already to the Commission.
Of course, there's also this perception that there's some who are dealt with kid gloves by the Commission, and often the Minister Pravin Gordhan is used as an example of such, and there are others who are dealt harshly by the Commission, and the example there would be the latest, where we saw arguments made by former President Jacob Zuma's lawyers. What do you think that this does in terms of the way in which the Commission conducts its own work, and the importance then around some of these perceptions that may exist around it?
Yes, it is. Perceptions are exceptionally important for the Commission, because the Commission cannot only rely on the law. It is also there in order to convince the South African public ultimately about what they are going to find in their final report and the recommendations they will make. And I think they have to be seen as equal-handed, as balanced, as unbiased in the way in which they come to their conclusions. which means that, and I think that was the main purpose of President Zuma's presentation when he asked for the Judge Zondo's recusal, is to try to focus on that and to create uncertainty about whether the Commission is indeed holding those values and applying those values. So I think this is going to be another opportunity for Mr. Moyane in order to try to challenge the Commission's even-handedness and unbiased nature. But I think one needs to take also into account that when about 4 months ago, when Minister Pravin Gordhan was supposed to appear before the Commission for this cross-examination, he asked for an extension because he said he had some cabinet permit. And Judge Zondo was actually very critical of that and said, well, and was very hesitant to actually grant that to him. So I think in that sense, yes, it is a perception that exists, but it is sometimes, I would say, an unfair perception that it is only leaning towards the one side, that of Pravin Gordhan, and very much against Moyane. Because ultimately the Commission is presented or must take a position based on what is presented to them. And so far there hasn't been a very strong case in order to sort of exonerate Mr. Moyane from what he has been accused or implicated in.
And maybe, Professor Kotze, just to reflect a little bit on what came out of the Commission just on Friday, where we saw the ANC Gauteng, Johannesburg Mayor rather, Jeff Makubo, before that Commission. And, you know, before this inquiry started, there was a sentiment that there were sentiments that this commission was going to be the ANC on trial and not necessarily a process that was going to find other players, going to investigate other players, but that it was really the ANC here that was going to be under the spotlight. Last week, Friday, of course, gave us insight into part of how the machinery of the ANC works at a regional level, if nothing else. And that relationship between private business interests who are also perhaps card-carrying ANC members, and that the blurring of those lines between who gets to do business with who, and the conflict of interest that are at play. What do you think that the testimony that we heard last week, the impact of that is going to be on the ANC going forward?
I think the ANC is in a very awkward situation because, I mean, we all know the ANC is the governing party at national level and most of the provinces. And if we go back to the definition of state capture, that very much involves the ANC as the governing party, and then all the other partners, whether it's the public, private sector, or it's the state-owned enterprises, and all of them, how they become involved in that relationship. So this is in essence what the Commission is about. It's impossible to exclude the ANC from this because the ANC is the governing party. I think what we are seeing is that it focuses very much on the period, the Zuma period. So it's not so much focused on the Ramaphosa period, although it's the same political party that has been in power as the government. And I think what the distinction that's been made and the sort of dualism that actually, or schizophrenia, that really has emerged is the ANC, but it's almost two ANCs that we are talking about. It is the ANC of about the last 10 years, and then the ANC now since 2017. And I think the main focus is obviously on the period of President Zuma, and not that of the current period. And then in that way, I think the ANC will be able to make this distinction between the two of them.
But Professor Kotze, that's what the ANC would like us to believe. They would like us to believe that there are two ANCs, but they're not. There's only one ANC. And when you look at how tied up the relationships have been behind the scenes, we cannot with absolute certainty say that the continuation of those relationships is not what it was before. Do you believe that we can say that?
No, I don't think we can say that. And we've seen it now again during the time of the pandemic with the PPE scams and with the corruption that we've seen being committed there already. So I'm not arguing at all. No, this is not my argument. This is my interpretation of what I'm seeing of how the ANC are presenting themselves. I don't try to justify it, I'm simply saying this is the strategy that's being followed, and this is how they try to present themselves to the public. President Ramaphosa obviously tries with his anti-corruption campaign in order to distinguish himself from the Zuma era. And what we've seen now with this last local government election, the by-elections there, is that it seems that there is an element of success that they have. They have not lost any of the main seats during this time. So it seems as if in terms of a very limited scope that we have now. But the point is that the main emphasis of this period is indeed the Zuma era. If you look at the terms of reference of the Commission, this is what it is supposed to do. It's not supposed to look now at the current situation necessarily, but rather what has been presented to it, mainly in the form of the former Public Protector Thuli Madonsela's report. We go back to the main rationale for this commission. It is actually that report. And that is the terms of reference of this commission.
That was political analyst Professor Dirk Kotze. Let me thank you for your time tonight on